Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 24, chapter entitled Worshipping Govardhan Hill, text 15. Kim indreneha bhutanam swasva karmanuvartinam anishenanyatha kartum svabhava vihitam nrinam. Kim indreneha bhutanam swasva karmanuvartinam anishenanyatha kartum svabhava vihitam nrinam. Kim indreneha bhutanam swasva karmanuvartinam anishenanyatha kartum svabhava vihitam nrinam. Svabhava vihitam nrinam. Kim indreneha bhutanam swasva karmanuvartinam anishenayata kirtum svabhava vihitam nrinam. Kim indreneha bhutanam swasva karmanuvartinam anishenanyatha kartum svabhava vihitam nrinam. Ladies. Kim indreneha bhutanam swasva karmanuvartinam anishenanyatha kartum svabhava vihitam nrinam. Kim, what? Indrena, with Indra. Iha, here. Bhutanam, for living entities. Swasva, each their own. Karma, of fruitive action. Anuvartinam, who are experiencing the consequences. Anishena, Indra, who is incapable. Anyatha, otherwise. Kartum, to make. Swabhava, by their conditioned natures. Vihitam, that which is ordained. Nrinam, for men. Translation. Living beings in this world are forced to experience the consequences of their own particular previous work. Since Lord Indra cannot in any way change the destiny of human beings, which is born of their own nature, why should people worship him? Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Krishna's argument here is not a negation of free will. If one accepts the existence of karma as a system of laws awarding reactions for our present activities, then we ourselves, according to our nature, will decide our future. Our happiness and distress in this life have already been educated and fixed according to our previous activities, and not even the demigods can change that. They must award us the prosperity or poverty, sickness or health, happiness or distress due us by our previous work. However, we still retain the freedom to select a pious or impious mode of activity in this life. And the choice we make will determine our future suffering and enjoyment. For example, if I was pious in my last life, in this life, the demigods may award me great material wealth, but I'm free to spend my riches for good or for bad purposes, and my choice will determine my future life. Thus, although no one can change the karmic results due him in this life, everyone still retains his free will, by which he determines what his future situation will be. Lord Krishna's argument here is quite interesting. However, it neglects the overriding consideration that we are all eternal servants of God and must satisfy him by all that we do. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuthapadakkamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sakrachadam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. It's actually very overwhelming. Just a lot of memories that come flooding. Actually, tomorrow marks 16 years when I first walked into this temple, Radha Ashtami of 1997. And to see how and what Krishna has done with my life and the lives of so many people, it's very overwhelming for me at this moment. So, just want to give that due respect and time. And I'm just very grateful to be here amongst all of you. It's nerve-wracking to speak from this Vyasasana. I always thought that my constitutional position was just sitting down here and hearing from people. And again, Gaurang Prabhu actually very strongly wouldn't take no for an answer. And so I'm doing this a service for him more than anything else. I'm just very grateful to be here with all of you. It's said that a fool is discovered only when he begins to speak. So I'm praying for your mercy and kindness, and please forgive me if I say anything wrong or incorrect, but I'm just going to share my heart, because it's much easier to speak from my struggles than from anything else, because there is plenty to speak from. So the context of this verse is Krishna speaking to Nanda Maharaj about worshipping Govardhan Hill instead of worshipping Indra. And the focus of the verse and the purport very relevant to my life as it is right now. And to actually understand that the biggest gift we have is our free will. And sometimes we just don't know what to do with it. And sometimes when we are given a treasure, when we don't fully understand its utility, we use it in different ways. But when we begin to understand it more and more, the sense of responsibility that comes with it is extremely overwhelming. And free will is the biggest gift, because without free will, it's impossible to experience love. To give love and to receive love. It's practically impossible to experience it fully. And the gift of free will is many times misused. We know that. And when we begin to recognize how big the gift of free will is, with it comes so much responsibility. And that responsibility can not only be overwhelming, it can be very confronting too. Right? Because now we become solely responsible for our choices. And sometimes, and this is through my own personal experience I've seen, by making choices I want to shy away from the fact that I want to take responsibility for my life. So it is very easy to externalize the problems that we have, saying that, well, other people are the cause of it. Other people are responsible for it. Right? This unwillingness to take responsibility for our own lives, and running away from the sense of responsibility, can so easily and so unconsciously happen. Even in devotional service, right? We have to actually always battle walk the fine line between, settling down comfortably, meaning we are looking for that sweet spot in our devotional service too. Right? So our services, our ashram, kind of settling down, moving into autopilot, and being there, so that we, in some ways, we don't have to take responsibility for what Krishna is really calling us to do. I found myself in several times in my devotional service in that situation, thinking, okay, in the next 2 years, things will settle, and then, everything will be on autopilot, and then everything will be wonderful and nice. Right? But then, deep inside, there is also a call. Krishna is calling us to do something more. And to do something more requires for us to take responsibility of our free will. And He always gives us a choice. At the end of the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, after speaking the entire Gita, He tells Arjuna, I've told you all that I have to tell. You do what you think is right. Now, when the onus is suddenly turned on us, it's very scary. Because what if I go wrong? Right? And it's hard to actually confront our own sense of failure. Our personal sense of failure is the most difficult thing that we can carry. Especially when we make mistakes and we have to accept the fact that actually I made the wrong choice. Right? And when that moment arises, it's so easy to find, mind just automatically goes to a point where we want to find causes of our problem. We tend to externalize it. Situations, circumstances, of course, big one, people. Right? And so there's this victim mentality that we unconsciously tend to gravitate towards because it is difficult to accept responsibility for our actions. But somehow the material world brings us to the point where we have to confront the fact that we are solely responsible for our life. 100%. No one else is responsible for it. And when we understand free will that way, it's very scary to take the next step. Because both indecision and over-decisiveness becomes an overcompensation for not fully taking responsibility for our free will. Right? Because indecision, I don't want to do anything wrong, so I'll just stay in my cocoon until I'm forced out of it. And the material world works in a way where we are forced out of it. Right? And then circumstances, we blame circumstances and situations for, God, this happened, this devotee did this, because of which I am in this situation now. So indecisiveness is one extreme, and the other extreme is, overconfidence. That I want to control everybody's free will so that I don't have to take responsibility for mine. Everybody should provide for me so that I don't have to take responsibility for the burden that I carry. Right? So both sides, these are two extremes of shying away from responsibility and personally carrying our free will. But when we actually move away from that, I would say, victim mentality, and I think just dwelling on it a little bit, this is Dhritarashtra's situation in the Gita, the beginning of the Gita, where he just seems to be a victim of everything, circumstances, situations, where he's refused to take responsibility for his own decisions and actions. And he's now hoping for the best and blaming everybody else for his situation. And this is, again, the lack of taking responsibility. Right? So we tend to externalize, but when we move away from that, when we actually start becoming responsible for our own life, then it is scary and nervous. We have to walk that nervous path. Right? And so we begin to ask ourselves this question: what is the right thing to do? It's interesting that the first chapter of the Gita is entitled Arjuna Vishada Yoga. I like to translate it as the yoga of Arjuna's despair. And when we come to this place of despair, what is the right thing to do? It's not easy, because the material world, and especially when we come to devotional service, it's very gray. We wish it were more black and white. Because when it's black and white, it's much easier to take decisions. Right? We can say this is right and this is wrong, move forward. But it's very gray. And it's a fact. We have to deal with our own needs and emotions. And we also have to bear the consequences of other people's needs and emotions. That's the interaction in the material world. So, and it's a very gray area. So when we wade through this grayness, it's just very complicated. And in that grayness, then taking responsibility for our choices and our decisions is a scary thing to walk. Right? So we're always looking for what the sense of right is. Like, we want to do the right thing. Right? Intentionally, we all want to do the right thing. Inherently, we have all been given the sense of right. It's impossible to do any activity without justification. Isn't that true? Right? We have to feel deep inside that what we are doing is right. Right? We cannot do something that we feel is wrong. We experience guilt and shame when we feel that. Right? We have to feel that this is right. Right? We have been given that inherent sense of rightness. We may not know what is right, but we can only act when we feel that this is the right thing to do. Right? We have been given that, and that comes with our free will. And when we become aware of the fact that we have this free will and we have this sense of right, then the world becomes more confusing, because now I have to do the right thing. I have responsibility. I have to be doing what is right here. And when it's gray, it's just very difficult to understand what is right and what is wrong. Right? Sometimes, even in interactions with devotees, yes, we should not be offending anyone, but sometimes we have to be strong. Right? Where is the fine line? And so, the tendency many times is to not think about it, or to justify it. In Shastrically, we can justify it too. There are verses on both sides. But the real challenge, I feel, and this is where I find myself most of the times, is the spiritual life is walking this fine line of despair. This call to actually do the right thing and assume full responsibility for the consequences, even when we don't know what the consequences or action will be. The only thing that we can put trust on is our sincerity and the fact that Krishna is taking care of my life. Right? So that despair, when we learn to live in that space of despair, we begin to recognize how important our choices are. Even small choices, even words that we use, actions that we take on a day-to-day basis, moment-to-moment basis. Because we are solely responsible for our life and the consequences that come about. And when we recognize the burden of that responsibility, as we walk the grayness of our own spiritual life, we also begin to recognize how important the power of prayer is. Because now, at every moment, I have to tell Krishna, Krishna, please, I don't know what is right. I have no idea. I'm only trying my best to act from what I see. And of course, there is guidance, and guidance coming from the scripture, guidance coming from devotees. But even in the Bhagavatam, we find that many times, even when there is advice coming, we see, I think, 7th chapter of the 1st canto, where Arjuna has to punish Ashwatthama. There are different opinions that are given, and it's confusing. Right? It's very confusing. And every person who's giving the opinion is a devotee, and also has proper justification in terms of where they're coming from. At the end of the day, Arjuna has to make his own decision. Right? And so, again, carrying that responsibility, in spite of all the guidance that comes our way, still knowing that I am making my choice, and everything else that comes to make the choice in the right way is how Krishna's grace flows in my life. Is in one sense, a very scary prospect. Because again, I have to bear the consequences of my own action. Right? So when we confront this sense of right, and doing what is right, which is such a subjective proposition in of itself, then we also learn how to depend. Because it's just natural for us to actually say that I actually don't know. And the material world does pose situations which are so confusing that, we are brought to our knees. And Arjuna, it happened to Arjuna. Right? That's how the Gita opens. I just don't know. And to me, that actually truly symbolizes surrender. is the ability to take full responsibility and at the same time recognize that in spite of taking full responsibility, my flashlight only shows me so far. I don't really know how to walk. So my dependency on Krishna and His guidance and the guidance coming from devotees is a lot more. I don't necessarily say, well, you told me and so I did it. Because that so easily happens. That's why it is also difficult for sometimes for devotees to give advice, because, okay, if I'm going to advise you right now, and then later on you blame me for telling you what to do, right? But the whole exchange of giving and receiving advice is the person receiving advice takes full responsibility. That at the end of the day, it's my choice. And the person giving advice is giving it in such a way that he or she doesn't really impose on somebody else's free will. Because free will is the biggest gift that we have, the biggest gift that Krishna has given us, through which we actually experience love. So, for me, this verse specifically speaks about our responsibility, along with our free will, the responsibility that comes in our own life, especially when we are devotees, the responsibility for the choices that we make. Because Krishna really wants to make use of our lives. We can't take our lives cheaply. Every choice that we make, in one sense, is either aligning with what Krishna wants for our life to be or going away from it. And so it's serious, because Krishna wants to make full use of our life. And most of the times we say that we are just insignificant. But at the same time, it's a part of Achintya Bheda Bheda. I was speaking to Radhanath Maharaj 3 weeks ago when I was in the US, New York. Maharaj was there, and he was saying how Achintya Bheda Bheda works in very interesting ways. He was saying, yes, we are insignificant, but at the same time we are significant. That our choices matter. Because it affects our life and it affects other people's lives and it affects what Krishna wants to do with our life. So it's serious. And so when we learn how to take this responsibility for our lives and learn to walk that path of despair, to be fully ourselves in Krishna's service, then we also begin to recognize that this verse, when we talk about karma or free will, it's actually extremely empowering and not fearful. So this is usually how I speak. I give short classes and open it up for more questions, comments, exchange. Any questions? Yes. Thank you. So Krishna is saying living beings in this world are forced to experience the consequences of their own particular previous work. Sure, sorry. So the question is, how does the verse actually connect to what I spoke? And I should have been more, I guess, created the links more clearly. But I was overwhelmed, as I said, when I sat on the Vyasasana. So thank you for clarifying. So Krishna says in this verse, living beings in this world are forced to experience the consequences of their own particular previous work. So this is actually depicting the law of karma. So if you understand the context, right? Indra and the residents of Vrindavan, this is an annual celebration that they have. They're worshipping Indra because Indra provides for their day-to-day living. Right? So many times our choices are made because we're getting something in return. Where we want something. And if I don't go to this person or if I don't make this choice, then I'm afraid I'll not get what I want. But sometimes we are in situations where we may have to make choices for a higher purpose, where we may not get what we want, but we may get what we need, because that's what Krishna wants to do with our life. And those kinds of choices is what I was actually referring to. They're very difficult to make, because it's easy to settle down, be comfortable. Right, so this is something that I always think about. If we are searching for comfort, we'll never find the truth. But if you're searching for truth, we will eventually find comfort. So looking for truth means, again, understanding that the law of karma is going to act. What I do, there will be consequences for it. But not making our choices from a place of fear. That if I do something wrong, yes, that fear will be there. I shouldn't be doing something wrong. Yes. But at the same time, also recognizing that whatever the consequences will be, I just have to take full responsibility for my choices. Not coming at it from a place of fear, but coming at it from a place of inspiration, where understanding that if I make the choices in the right way, then even if the consequences may not be what I like, eventually Krishna will be pleased. I hope that clarifies it. Okay. One second, there's somebody asking a question here. Come. Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, can you share your experiences of preaching in New York a little bit?
I was asked to give brahmachari class today evening, so that's the whole theme.
General for all of us. Those who will not be there in the evening class.
Sure. Preaching in the West is okay. Thank you.
Prabhuji, you just mentioned about truth, previous questions related to. I would like to ask, what is the truth? Don't you think truth is a relative concept? What is truth for somebody else, which not truth for me? And our rational decides our choice. Our rationality decides our social and physical upbringings and our desire and goals. So truth, talking about truth, you said that truth is a comfort, comfort is truth. If you search for truth, there won't be comfort, there won't be truth. What is truth? And how can be truth for someone else and same truthness would not be correct for other one? Can you clarify about the absolute truth, sir? And it would be correct and applicable to entire universe? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I guess everyone heard the question this time. I think the invitation that Krishna is giving us in the Gita is to find the truth for ourselves. In the sense that Krishna is speaking the entire Gita, he's declaring himself to be the absolute truth. But at the same time, in order to experience truth, we have to walk the path. There is really no other way. Right? So I wish there was a formula. I wish I could tell you, well, this is the truth. But with a relative mind, living in a relative world where there are so many relative truths, I have to experience the absolute truth. That is the despair that I was talking about. So spiritual life is actually walking it, and as we walk it, we will make mistakes. But when we are awake to our mistakes and take responsibility for it, then all that it is doing is pushing us in the direction of that absolute truth. And that absolute truth is what Krishna wants. Reaching Krishna. Basically aligning our free will with Krishna's. So yes, truth is relative, truth is subjective in the world that we live in. But at the same time, Krishna has a plan in our life That's why it becomes a moment-by-moment decision, asking Krishna, Krishna, what do you want me to do? What is it that you desire from my life? And that prayer will eventually guide us to finding and experiencing the truth itself, which is what Krishna speaks in the Gita. And so Arjuna was ready to ask that question, put himself, I would say, in a vulnerable position. And the question then we have to ask ourselves is, am I ready to put myself in that vulnerable position? To take the risk, to find it, to experience it for myself. Because it's not easy. So again, I refrain from saying, we all know what the absolute truth is. But how we get there, how we experience it, is very relative. Based on our conditioning, based on what we need to do, based on the choices that we make. That's where our sense of responsibility and your free will really comes. Else? Going through.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for nice realizations. How do you, it looked like you spoke more about law of karma than the mercy of Krishna. How do you reconcile between the two? Mercy of Krishna is Krishna takes the responsibility. Law of karma is I take the responsibility.
The last few days I've been reciting this verse. And during my japa, Ananyas Chintayanto Mam Yejana Pariyupasate Tesham Nityabhiyukthanam Yogakshemam Vahamyaham. So, the law of karma is my responsibility. And Krishna is saying in the Gita, I preserve what you have and I give you what you lack. But then the condition for that is that I remember Krishna constantly. So I think my personal experience is that when I assume responsibility for my life, it actually pushes me in the direction of having to remember Krishna every single moment because I actually don't know. And the law of karma is so perplexing and so complicated and so confusing and painful and fearful. And the fact that I also have to take full responsibility for it without blaming anyone else. The only person I can actually depend on is Krishna. And then I find that Krishna's grace actually flows. So, my understanding is that they're both very, very closely connected. That one doesn't really, in fact, the law of karma itself is Krishna's mercy for us to actually depend on Him. I hope that is satisfactory. Any other question, comments? Haribalan Prabhu is asking me a question on how preaching in New York happens. So if there is no other question directly on the verse itself. Anybody else? Question? Just one more question here.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, my question is that before coming into Krishna consciousness, because we all are conditioned, we have a lot of desires. Although we pray to Krishna that Krishna, please make me your instrument, whatever body, whatever resources you have given me, let me use it in your service. But at the same time, we have deep-rooted desires from the past, maybe millions of lifetimes. So I feel it is very tough to forego those desires. Although I also pray that Lord, all my desires which are taking me away from you, please remove those desires, or let that desire that to serve you dominate all the other desires. So my question is that prayers versus the deep-rooted past desires. That I'm praying something, but it is from inside my heart, deep inside my heart. There are so many other things that I want. So please don't fulfill them. How to have a balance between both.
Sometimes it requires for us to be very honest and tell Krishna, I have this desire. I don't know what to do about it. I was reading third canto where Kardama Muni is actually praying to Vishnu for a wife. Now, from a point of view of devotional service, I mean it's a material desire. He's asking for a wife. But his mood behind it, the honesty behind it, completely melts Vishnu's heart. Because it's not coming from a place of feeling entitled that you have to fulfill this for me. At the same time, it's an expression of my own inability. I'm conditioned. And so Krishna, you decide what you would want to do with this conditioning. How would you want to engage it in the best possible way? This is what I can do for you. Use my conditioning in this manner, because these desires do live. At the same time, please purify this desire. And it requires tremendous sincerity to pray from that place. There is really, my experience is there is no real easy answer. Of course, there are certain desires that are very clear to us that if we act on them, it will take us away from Krishna. So we have to be very strong. And there are certain others that are not right or wrong. They're just conditionings. Sometimes we tend to look at conditionings as this is right and this is... Some things are just conditionings. They may not be right or wrong. But the only thing that we can do is we can engage them in a way that they're converted from material to spiritual. And so again, it requires a lot of prayer. And Krishna is capable of actually making that shift happen. With so many devotees' lives, we have seen that. So if Krishna can do it for so many people, He can also do it for us. Okay. Apology.
When we see the saintly people, right, like Prabhupada and like other great saints who have been there in our movement, like they have gone through so much suffering, but whereas us, I'm really afraid of suffering. And even what I'm going through right now is more than enough for me. But when you look at them, you see like, wow, they went through so much more. And that's when they, I mean, is that really what Krishna wants us to go through as well? Or, I mean, I'm honest that I don't have the capacity to suffer as much as some of these saints did. So where does that leave me?
So if I understand your question right, when we read the lives of saints, we also see that they underwent a lot of suffering. And is that what Krishna really wants in our life? Does Krishna want us to suffer? Is there no other path to saintlyhood other than the path of suffering? It's a common question. I also told this to Maharaj in January when I was speaking to him. I said that this path is actually scary for me to walk, because what it's calling me to walk, I don't really think I have the capacity to do it. It is scary. So is there an easier way? I don't think Krishna wants us to suffer. I mean, we all know that. Deep inside, Krishna is truly our well-wisher. But in the path of coming back to Him, And this goes back to the original choice we made. The primary misuse of our free will when we left the spiritual world. Right? The path of going back to Him is a difficult one because we are in the material world. And the path of going back sometimes has necessary elements of suffering. But that is only for the sake of taking us back home. Right? So the context of that suffering, if we only look at the suffering itself, then it is very overwhelming. But if you look at the context of the suffering, then Ravindra Shri Prabhu likes to say, he said, there are two kinds of suffering. He says, suffering with meaning and suffering without meaning. We have a choice to choose one of the two. Right? Either it's suffering without meaning or it's suffering with meaning. So when we understand the context of why the suffering is, the higher purpose for it, then it's possible to accept it as Krishna's grace. Right? So, do we want suffering? No. Will it be a part of our spiritual path? Yes. I mean, it's not necessary, but mostly we find that's the case. But how it manifests, that's totally dependent on our karma, what Krishna wants from our lives. But the willingness to walk through it, this is the best that we can do. Right, so I would say let's not worry about the suffering, because when we are willing to walk through it, pray hard, Krishna also gives us the strength to go through it. And then what we become out of that, we couldn't have planned for ourselves. Krishna doesn't give us the answer; He leads us to it. Because if He gave us the answer, we wouldn't walk. So He doesn't give us the answer. He says, okay, just keep walking a little more, a little more, a little more. And finally, when we are there, we realize, wow, I never thought I would come this far. But I have. So, okay, I think it's time. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.